How you going? It's Graeme here, and welcome to another edition of What Can I Do? Tonight we have our special guest which is Dave Oneegs, and welcome, Dave.
Thank you, Graeme. Great to be here.
How's your Christmas been, mate?
Christmas has been, let's just say, different. It's been, it's been an extraordinary year, and I'm someone who's always loved Christmas, but I've also seen that I guess our customs and traditions are kind of under threat at the moment. Yep. And, I had plans to, travel interstate around Christmas as well, and all those plans kind of got thrown out the window. So trying to stay cheery and happy during the Christmas break whilst we've been seeing the insanity and changes throughout our country. It's been a juggling act, let's just say that. What about yourself?
Oh, mate, happy holidays. It's it's very different. I'm lucky. We have we had our family around us, our grandkids and everything. So Christmas to us wasn't that different, but the year certainly has been. I'm just interested. You got anything planned for New Year's Eve?
Yeah, I do actually. I was going to be on the Gold Coast, but my approach at the moment, Graeme, is this year has taught me to make the most of every single day. And so we're just going to stay on the Gold Coast. We're actually going to go up north around to the Noosa area and have a little holiday, Georgie and I, my partner and I.
Yep.
And, that's all we're doing at the moment. Is my theme or motto at the moment is just make the most of every day, because I don't like to be pessimistic. I really like, you know me pretty well now. I'm very much the optimist. But unless we get Australians on the same page, I don't know how much more of our freedoms will be around in the not too distant future if we don't really, start finding some solutions. So, I'm someone who's like, let's hope and pray and intend for the best, but let's also prepare for anything. And so at the moment, I'm just living every day to the fullest and making the most of this amazing country we got.
Well, that's interesting that you mentioned making making the most of every day, because it leads us into what have you been up to over this last crazy year, Dave? Tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, look, it's been a really odd year for me, Graeme. Like everyone, I think at the start of the year, I was also caught by surprise with the whole, the release of the virus from Wuhan and that whole thing. And I remember I've been following the alternative media for quite some time, and I saw the so-called leaked footage coming out of Wuhan, and we saw these people. You probably recall the images, these people in China falling flat on their faces. Yep. And I remember seeing this thing and actually going, oh my God, the most deadly contagion has been released, a proper bioweapon, and we're all in big trouble. Yep. And I remember driving around the streets, urgently looking for masks myself, because I really thought this thing was real. And this was before it even made the mainstream media in a big way here. And the word was already out. There was a shortage of masks. You couldn't get masks at Bunnings. You couldn't get them at the chemist. There was a shortage of everything. And anyway, as time went on and I started to catch on to, I guess what we understand to be a major deception and I guess a real Trojan horse for other agendas, I started to speak out and call out on social media. And I was at the time selling medical devices for a great company down there in Sydney. I was selling defibrillators with one of the Iron Man legends that you might know in Sydney. Anyway, I was his national sales and marketing manager. But because I'd become so outspoken on social media, I voluntarily chose to step away from that role, because I was obviously potentially bad for the brand, because there is obviously a stigma that comes attached with, how can I say, calling out.
Truth.
Yeah, telling the truth. There's a stigma attached with that. We're being what's called a so-called COVID denier or conspiracy theorist. And so I stepped away from that role. I keep myself afloat by doing a bit of investing and trading on cryptocurrency and Forex and so on. And so I've had to sharpen my skills in that capacity this year. The market volatility has certainly been, there's benefits to that as well. There's also obviously risks involved, but it was a strange year, and where things kind of turned for me, Graeme, where I guess I got a bit of a platform to reach more people is one night, it was actually the anniversary of my sister's passing, and I was already feeling pretty emotional that day. And it was nine years ago on that day that she passed. And I saw the footage come from Parliament down there in Victoria of Jenny McCarkis when she was refusing to answer those questions. And it was just such an insult to our democracy and an insult to our people, and such a blatant, irrefutable example of someone hiding and dodging the truth and refusing to be transparent with our people. And I was just ropeable. And I got on social media, and I just unleashed on my Facebook page. It just all came out, just the rage and the emotion and the just, I guess, the disgust of what these people have in contempt of our democracy, you know. And I remember I just started unloading on that video about, come on, Australia, this is just outrageous what's going on. And that video went viral. You know, I remember I went out to dinner with my girlfriend that night, and I looked back at my phone, and I sat down at dinner, and I was sort of cooled off and relaxed. And that video had about 200,000 views on Facebook within an hour. And I was like, oh my gosh, what have I just done? And I had all these missed calls from friends and people saying, you've lost your mind, what's going wrong with you? And there was thousands of comments from all around the world saying, finally, someone's speaking up. Someone is calling it how it is. I had thousands of people saying, this guy's a maniac, call the police, call the AFP, blah, blah, blah. But it just resonated with a lot of people, Graeme. It resonated with a lot of people that we are witnessing something that is completely criminal happening in our country. And I've said this multiple times, that the naivety and the good nature of Australian people and our complacency, our lackadaisical, she'll be right, mate, attitude to life has been completely manipulated and taken advantage of. And we're being hoodwinked by some very, very dark people. And that's just the cold hard truth of it.
And I think, your point is that, the amount of people that watched what to you was just a venting or, as we all say, a bit of a rant, it just shows you that you're not alone, because there's a lot of people out there that feel the same way, but probably weren't, I don't know, motivated, or probably not the right word, motivated, but they just didn't do what you did. And now there are more and more people, and I'm sure you know that because you've seen them, who are doing exactly the same thing now and speaking up and making people aware, but telling people to ask questions, because that's the key to it. Ask questions. Don't take anything for granted. Just ask questions.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about, what is termed chemtrails, because I know you've done a little bit of work on that.
Yeah, well, look, that was where I started, I guess, building a bit of a following, because I was exposing the weather engineering. You know, chemtrails is like the term they kind of put to, conspiracy theorists and so on, and it's a term that's thrown around loosely, but it's actually known, I guess, scientifically and amongst the industry as weather engineering, weather modification, or stratospheric aerosol injections. And all this stuff, all this information is freely available all around the world. There is the global weather engineering program happening. It's a coordinated effort, and it's primarily by a number of countries and I guess institutions who are working together to manipulate the global weather patterns. And anyone who still thinks that this is not happening, you've just got to suspend your disbelief, and as well ask yourself a couple of questions. Are the powers that be manipulating the food supply, for example? Genetically modified foods? Yes, of course. Are the powers that be manipulating human DNA and potential for human gene expression? Yes, of course they are. Every single aspect of our planet is being manipulated in some way, shape, or form. There is nothing that is being untouched by, I guess, these incredibly powerful, companies and institutions and so on. Why would they not do the weather? It's clearly documented that this has been going on for such a long time. Particularly, it was most effective in the Vietnam War, when they tried to flood out the Viet Cong. They spread enough particulate into the sky to cloud seed. Cloud seeding is nothing new, but they tried to flood out the Viet Cong, and then when that didn't work, these people decided to use Agent Orange and basically tried to defoliate, as you know, tried to defoliate an entire country. So the fact that this happened, whether it be peacetime or wartime, it doesn't matter. And I think the thing that's becoming more and more obvious to an incredibly large number of people now, which is why I feel we are at a turning point, is that we aren't in peacetime anymore. There is a war being waged upon us. It's an information war, but it's also a covert war. And you'll hear the term thrown around, silent weapons for quiet wars. And these spraying programs and these injection or vaccination programs, these food modification programs, they're all linked. They're all part of the same agenda to, I guess, weaken and subvert humanity into this new system that we're seeing rolled out all around us. So I just encourage anyone, suspend your disbelief. I know that it might seem hard to think that our skies are being sprayed, that our governments are in on it. But unfortunately, the sad, hard truth is that it's happening, and you've only got to look up. And if you go to my page, and I wonder how long my Facebook page will show up, because we know that the technocrats don't really like the truth getting out there very much. But you've only got to see, there's 32,000 people following my Facebook content, and they will send in their photos from all around the world. It's irrefutable if you're just willing to suspend your disbelief and go to www.geoengineeringwatch.org. It's all there, all the patents, all the admissions. There's actually, at the moment, Graeme, a lot of European pilots really blowing the whistle on this too. And so this is the thing. It's just going to take people to suspend their disbelief, keep an open mind, and also ask yourself the question, if the government was doing something that they didn't want us to know about, would they necessarily tell us? Of course they wouldn't.
Well, we've already proven that.
We've already proven that. So, yeah, it's something that I've just found. Look, I'm someone who loves the great outdoors, Graeme. Love surfing, love bushwalking, love camping. I've spent my whole life surfing, and when I sit out there in the surf and I see, I first started noticing it almost 10 years ago. It's something that I can never just be comfortable with and just let it go. And the only way of ever getting a change is going to be mass awareness. So that's why I encourage people to do their own research, make up their own mind.
Let me ask you a question. We always like to run certain things, or pretty much everything, across what we call the pub test. What do you say when people look up in the sky and they see a plane and there's a trail behind it, and they say, "Oh, that's just the exhaust from the jet engines"? What would you say to someone like that?
Well, often I find now, Graeme, that it's pretty rare that I find people, if they've already made up that decision that it's just a condensation trail, it's pretty rare that they'll turn around. Do you know what I mean? So when someone says, "Oh, it's just condensation," I might ask them, "Well, are you aware there's a weather engineering program going on?" And unfortunately, 9 out of 10 times, I'll get, "Oh, that's just a conspiracy theory, mate." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's probably at least 9 out of 10 times. But what I'll find is if I say to someone, "Hey, check out that," and we'll see the big long trail dispersing across the sky, and they'll say, "Oh, look at that trail," and they'll say, "Oh yeah, there goes the weather engineers again. Can't believe more people can't see this." So I'm finding more and more there's people who have caught onto the fact that it's real, they're awake, but they're equally frustrated as me that they can't seem to share the information, to a wider audience. And I think the thing that we really, really suffer from in this country right now is people aren't going to believe something until they see it on the television. It's just, it's that powerful. You could imagine the power of the Australian media just to disclose what's actually going on. The one channel that did do it, I'm not sure if it's been taken off YouTube, Graeme. I should see if I can find it for you. But 7 News in Dubbo ran a full, investigative report on their regular nighttime bulletin. It was about a 3 or 4 minute piece where the residents and the farmers at Dubbo had formally complained and had been lobbying because they had noticed how vast the weather engineering was and how much it was affecting rainfall and farming practices and so on. So that, to my knowledge, is the only case that I've seen on 7 News explicitly showing the weather engineering here in Australia. But then we had a cryptic piece on Brisbane 7 News last year as well, and I can get you that clip, where 7 News indicated, and the meteorologist actually said, "This is very strange. We've got all these unexplained lines showing up on our satellite images, and just did a cryptic little piece on this unexplained phenomena, and then explained that it was probably chaff from the military, which includes aluminium and a bunch of other particles. So they're the only two cases I've seen on the Australian mainstream media, but there's been multiple from other parts of the world.
Yeah, I actually saw the map that was with that piece where they had all the crisscross lines all over the place, and it just didn't fit with isobars and all. I'm not a weather person, so I don't know it, but it just looked extraordinarily unusual. And I think that's the thing that we want to do with everyone. I know you've been trying to do it too, is to get people to ask questions. Don't just take the word of one person. And I know social media has their fact checkers and they have their community standards, but the thing is, you have to start asking yourself questions about that as well, because censorship is usually done so that only one side of the story is exposed. And that's what we're having at the moment. There's always two sides to every story. Everything has two sides. And I think this is the key to it. And yes, you cannot convince everyone, but, people need to start, just doing their own research. And as we said earlier, we'll put the links and anything that we can up on these broadcasts, because we want people to click a link, take 5 minutes out of your day and have a look, have a read of something, and just find out what the other side of the story is. So tell us about, you and I have both had these conversations with Tom Barnett about, the health and well-being of the percentage of the population, which is like 95% plus. Tell us a little bit about what you say to people who say this is a pandemic.
Well, first of all, yeah, and like you say, Graeme, it just comes down to asking questions. And I'll ask them if they know of anyone who knows anyone who's actually succumbed to the virus, And sometimes they'll say, oh, I know an uncle here or an auntie lost there or a friend's cousin, nephew's niece somewhere, and so on. No one seems to know anyone directly, but it's all going to come down to, like, I just know that if I make a statement about the so-called pandemic, then it's my statement. But if I ask questions, that person's mind's going to open up, and I'll ask them, hey, you realise there's 250,000 frontline workers down there in Victoria. There wasn't one single recorded fatality of the frontline workers. 96,000 nurses, 25,000 police, all the aged care workers and hospital workers combined. And I'll just ask them, hey, do you think it was worth locking up everyone for months on end, choking women in the street, stomping people's heads in the ground, and having your constitutional freedoms basically shredded in front of you for what's happened? I'll ask them, was it worth it? And if they say, oh yeah, it was worth it, it had to be done, well, then I just know that I'm dealing with someone who's not gonna budge. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
Or I might ask them, I'll say, hey, look, if this thing is so contagious that we had to lock what they make it, the ring of steel in Melbourne, put people under curfew, destroy small businesses, push the suicide rate through the roof, domestic violence, drug abuse, alcoholism, if we had to do all that for such a severe, deadly virus, why was there no biohazard bins? Can you answer me that? Mm. And they'll say, oh, good point. So it's just a matter of having a couple of key bits of information that can help people understand that it's not anything about, a virus. It's about obedience training for the redefinition of our society and culture and the eradication of the Australian way of life. And if people can start to see that, the ends aren't, the means just aren't justified, for any way, shape or form. If we had have seen, Australians, we cherish and we respect our frontline workers, our police, our paramedics, our nurses, our doctors. If we had have seen them severely taking a toll, I know the police have had a bad rap, but if we had seen the police, knocking on doors and windows and, trying to, somehow contain this pandemic, and we had seen them, dying or becoming severely sick, different story. I think we would have all said, you know what, we need to take this thing incredibly seriously. And we all did. We gave them the benefit of the doubt. 2 weeks to flatten the curve has turned into 10 months of, try your communism.
Yeah, yeah.
Know what I mean?
And I've looked, and I know a lot of other people have looked. Have you been able to find any influenza statistics for this year?
Well, isn't that interesting that those statistics have clearly been wiped to zero? You know, the only thing that COVID seems to have really killed is the flu. And this is something that I know we make light of it, but it's incredibly serious that the highest institutions and sources of data that go to the public have been manipulated. And it's very, very, very serious that our country is being, you know, if you follow that train of thought, who's giving the orders to manipulate this data? And it's obviously coming from organizations like the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, massive pharmaceutical companies, the likes of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. How they call themselves a foundation, I'll never know. But anyway,
yeah, and there's been a lot of other statistics that have been sort of pushed to the side. I know suicide rates. If you dig deep, you'll find suicide rates are through the roof. The highest they've been for a decade. And there's no explanation for that other than the fact that people, more and more people are anxious about, this so-called pandemic, and if they catch it, they might die. And so anxiety, stress, mental health problems, and suicide rates are normally through from July to probably November. We're getting all of the charities that raise money for awareness around mental health and things of that nature. Nothing. All disappeared. And you have to ask yourself, why? Where are those figures? Why are we not seeing these figures? And it's astounding that that figures can be, health figures can be manipulated. And again, people just need to ask questions.
well, and everything's being manipulated, unfortunately, and everything is being silenced. And this is why we're on a very, I guess, slippery slope in this country and all around the world, because the truth is being silenced everywhere you turn. And we have literally thousands of the most well-qualified virologists, epidemiologists, geneticists, and so on, who are all, well, many are trying to get the word out to the masses on various platforms. And they are still being silenced. And I did a video with Jamie McIntyre live on Facebook, and he's very well versed in vaccine harm, vaccine injuries, big pharma cover-ups, and so on. And we went live, and then I got banned for 30 days. And all he did was share bona fide facts. So people need to really understand that big tech, and big tech is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Google, and the like, are colluding with big pharma and governments to create this new global system. And they're using the virus as the fear to push people into it and to justify the tyrannical behavior. But the reality is now that 10 months down the road, there's been no mass casualty event. There has been in terms of suicides and domestic violence and so on, 100%.
Yeah.
But in terms of the actual global mortality rates, here we are now at the end of 2020, the global mortality rates are the same, if not a little bit less than 2019. And the whole thing is, Graeme, this entire fraud, this entire, I guess, psychological operation that we've been subjected to, it all hinges on the polymerase chain reaction test, the PCR test, which has been openly proven and stated by the maker of that test himself, Carrie Mullis, that it's not meant to diagnose anything. It's meant to identify DNA fragments. It's not a diagnostic tool. But still in this country, the Australian media is driving the mandates of Big Pharma and the World Health Organization for more testing, because they'll use the testing to create more cases. They'll use the cases to create more fear. And the more fear they got, the more they can justify their new tyrannical measures and their new absurdity to cancel our culture. So that's why you get people like Gladys Berejiklian, the New South Wales Premier, and you get Daniel Andrews saying, oh, well, this new year, There'll be no kissing. There'll be no talking loudly. There'll be no singing. There'll be no dancing. It's like, are you people off? Are you serious?
Yep. Yep. So you stop being human and be something else. And what do you say to this ridiculousness of this max vaccination, where the pharmaceutical companies have complete immunity from any damages from this speedily made vaccine?
Oh, it's actually, you know, like I said before, I often make light of these things, but this is actually truly terrifying. What's being rushed through here. There's already reports of high percentages. We're talking, you know, in the first week, 2 to 3% of highly adverse reactions. We're hearing reports of deaths. These reports are obviously being silenced. But more importantly, there are incredibly well qualified, well respected professors who are geneticists who are sounding the alarm, saying that this is no ordinary vaccination. It doesn't fall into the category of normal vaccinations. It falls into the category of genetic engineering. Right? And this is the stuff that, look, I'm just going to be real with you. A lot of it goes over my head. But why on earth, when we've had a so-called virus, which we know the test has never, you know, the test doesn't prove anything. We've just had now, apparently today in Ireland, what's his name? Tony Holohan, the health minister over there, has openly admitted it's never been isolated. No one's been able to prove, to my knowledge, that it's been isolated. We haven't had a mass casualty event. Why are these people so determined to inject the whole world? There's been no fatalities in children. There's been no epidemic with people under 50. All we've had all around the world is people primarily in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And in the vast majority of those, 70s, 80s, and 90s have been listed as COVID or presumed to have died of COVID, not proven to have, right? And unfortunately, this is what happens every flu season. Every flu season, there's fatalities all around the world.
I was just about to say we've had what one could only call a typical flu season, called a different name.
And this is the thing, Graeme. Like when I was, you know, in my prior role with the medical company selling defibrillators, every single day, Graeme, every single day, from children to later stages of life, we have 100 deaths from sudden cardiac arrest in this country. 35,000 a year. That's 100 people dropped dead today from sudden cardiac arrest. Many of those were preventable by early defibrillation, right? Media doesn't do anything about that. You know why? Because they can't use it as a Trojan horse to drive an agenda.
Yeah.
You know? And this is the thing I wish Australians could understand. We had Daniel Andrews doing these lengthy press conferences saying, oh, sorry, we're going to have to extend the lockdown because a man in his 90s has died of COVID. The wicked virus it's can't be stopped. It's like, really? 90s? You know? Meanwhile, you know, you get the point I'm making.
Yeah. I think, you know, everyone out there looking, watching and listening knows that any death of any person is a tragedy, especially if it's from an illness, regardless of what that illness is. But we have to start now concentrating on how do we fix this problem where we have politicians ruling the electorate like slaves. I mean, these are elected officials. They are there to govern at our will. Yes, they are there to make us or to keep us safe and to make sure that that we're not exposed to any biohazards. They've passed their own biohazard act back in 2015, of which they broke many of the conditions in their own legislation by locking people up and so on and so on. But what do we do to make sure this never happens again, so that the people will get a choice and the transparency will be there? We have, as you know, started the Aussie Patriots Roll, which is basically to give people an opportunity to get information from one central point and to express their will that basically they want their rights protected, not squashed. So
So go on, Graeme.
So I was just going to say, unity. How do we get the people to unite and start asking questions and act instead of just sleeping?
I think that's the thing, you know, like I've noticed over the last particularly 3 months, that a lot of people are really starting to expose what's going on. And the more they expose it, the more they're called, I guess, COVID deniers, and they get censored and they get banned and they get restricted and all this sort of stuff. But the awakening is definitely happening. Excuse me. A lot of people are starting to ask questions. And I think even now, your biggest skeptics are starting to ask questions. And as people are realizing that we're in an information war, they're pushing out alternative content, like myself. So people like myself, we're trying to counter the mainstream narrative. But there comes a point where we're all doing our little bits and pieces. We might be sharing links, we might be sharing photographs, we might be sharing data, we might be sharing memes, it might be videos, all this sort of stuff. But there comes a point where that's only so effective, and all our energy is kind of, I guess, a bit disjointed. But what I'm learning from yourself, Graeme, when you asked me to come and have a look what you're doing, is that what you're seeking to do is get everyone on the same page, just to simply express the will of the people. Because I think, for myself and for some of my rants that I had where I really, I guess, exploded, they came from a real sense of feeling powerless to stop this. As one person who's I guess someone I'd call myself as awake, just powerless to really do anything. And then when you contacted me and say, hey, look, Dave, we have, I guess, legal instruments where we can express the will of the people peacefully, but directly, and in a way that can have a powerful outcome as well. And I know people think that we might be some sort of extremists or whatever, but as soon as I got to know you more, Graeme, I got to understand that you're a very intelligent man. You have purely the best interests of the Australian people at heart, because our voices are not being heard, our will is not being expressed, and we are disjointed. And this is about, I guess, a way to unify Australia and people who are feeling like all of us are. So maybe you could tell us a little bit, Graeme, about how the Aussie Patriots Roll started and what your vision is for it.
Yeah, well, look, basically, we need to restore the document that ruled, or it is the highest rule of law in this country, and that's our lawful Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act of 1901, which consists of its preamble, clauses 1 to 9, and the schedule, and only 8 lawful changes since 1901. So the people have only, there's been close to 50, I think, referendums, which is how you change the constitution. Only 8 of them have passed the people's vote. And the reason for that is the majority of them were not in the interest of Australia and Australians. Now, what we've had since 1973 is we've had our Commonwealth of Australia Constitution set aside by politicians by stealth. In other words, they did it in plain sight. They removed Commonwealth from the Constitution, and they removed the British monarch and replaced it with the Queen of Australia, which is a fiction. So what we're saying is, look, we know there's a lot of people out there that don't think we need the British Commonwealth and we don't need a monarch, but we are a constitutional monarchy. We do have an indissoluble constitution, which can only be dissolved by the people under Section 128, for those who are interested. And so we want to restore that document and make sure that the people will be in charge of their future. So the future security, the future prosperity, the future safety, all of that is at the will of the people, the Australian people, of the people, for the people, by the people. And that should always have been the case. We took our eye off the ball, we being the Australian people, we took our eye off the ball some years ago, many years ago. In fact, it was before the 1973 tragedy and treason by the Whitlam government, cemented into place in 1986 by the Australia Act by the Hawke government. So we've been conned, we've been duped, and we've had power taken from the people and given to the parliament. Now, we have a two-party preferred preferential voting system, which pretty much guarantees it'll be either Liberal or Labor. That was never intended by the framers of the Constitution. It was meant for one person, one vote for one candidate. That was it. Now, preferential voting is fine, but only if it's transparent. So if I say I'm going to vote for you, Dave, but if you don't get elected, I'm going to want to give my vote to Mary Jane, I should tell you that. So if you don't like that idea, if you don't like that idea, you can say to me, well, no, I'm not going to vote for you because I don't want my vote to go to Mary Jane. Do you understand what I'm saying?
course.
So it's all about choice of the people, and it's up to us to unite as one to restore this document that served us well for many years, reinstall it, restore it, and then take all this nonsense to the people and let the people decide how we move forward um, with our future. It's not going to be with the UN because we already know that would be canned straight away. They've tried to make us a republic, and the people said no to that as well. So there must be something else that we can do, but there's something needs to be done now, and that's what the Aussie Patriots roll is all about. And it's a collection point, if you like, of people like yourself, who we call Aussie warriors, Aussie Patriots, whatever you want to call them, so that you can, if you need information, you can come to us. If we don't have it, we'll find it. But you'll also get all the information, education you need to fully understand why this needs to be done and why we need to move as one voice, one Australia, all the tribes together. No segregation, no distractions, no divisions, just one country, which is the way that we've always been. We're a federation of states. There are no hard borders, regardless of what the politicians tell you. And the Constitution is the way that we get back. Whether we keep it or not, that's up to the people. But we have to restore it before we can move forward.
I've always loved what you said, Graeme, about, this isn't about you. It's not about me. It's not about any of the personalities and people that come in. This is about the will of the people and having one place to go and having, I guess, the legal instrument that was set up for us explicitly for this purpose to express the will of the people. What would you say, though, to anyone who might be skeptical, I guess, about registering on there? Are they, about their information, their privacy, just to allay any concerns like that, perhaps?
Well, one thing I want people to understand is we don't want your PIN number on your credit cards or your debit cards. All we need is your full name and address. We need bona fide. Before we can prove our point, we need to prove that we are who we say we are. So we need bona fide information. And generally, that's basically what you've already given to the government on the electoral roll. So your name, address, your email address that we can get to you on, and your mobile phone number so that we can contact you as a second level of security. That's it. Now, that information is kept offline. It's gathered via an encrypted enrolment form. That enrolment form is collated and put into a roll, which is basically a database, which is stored offline in 3 separate locations around Australia. Those locations, we're not going to obviously tell you where they are, but the thing is, it is the best encryption that we can get, unless we want to ring the CIA and ask them if they can give us an encryption for the data. But it's readily available data in the public domain. If you've got a credit card, a driver's license, rent something, you've rented a car or anything like that, booked a hotel, you've already given that information to corporations that will, in the fine print, not tell you that they are selling that information to somebody else. We're not doing that. We're keeping your information and only using it to restore our constitution, to do whatever it takes to get our country back for all Australians.
Yeah, well said. And I think, a lot of people have got to really question who they trust in this day and age. And, I think Australians are losing trust for the government. But, they've openly stated that they're seeking to fully indemnify all the vaccination manufacturers. So that us, the Australian people, do not have a legal leg to stand on when this thing goes pear-shaped, which it's bound to, because the adverse reactions are already at a very high incidence. And the other thing as well, trust of the Australian government is certainly waning as we start to learn more about the Defence Amendment Act, which will give not only Australian Defence Forces, but foreign troops full immunity from criminal proceedings. And people, the term gets thrown around a lot, wake up, but Australians need to be aware that the corporation that we're dealing with does not have our interests at heart. And you might not agree with me about everything I've got to say about the so-called virus or the pandemic, or you might not agree with me about everything I've got to say about the weather engineering or whatever. But the one thing that we do have in common is that we love our country. We love our country. We love the people here. We want to speak up for the Australian people. not for the corporations that are seeking to harm us. And that is unfortunately the brutal fact of the matter, that our complacency, like I said before, has been taken advantage of. We got caught napping, and these people aren't serving us, and there is an instrument to do that. And that's why I really wanted to support you in any small way that I can, Graeme. And, you know, if you're out there and you're feeling, you know, you're feeling that hopelessness, and you know in your soul, you know in your Australian spirit that something is wrong in this country, I promise you this, that the Aussie Patriots role is the place to be. That's the place where we will reignite the Australian spirit. That's the place where we will bring us all together, reunite our Australian family, the Australian tribes. And that's for all Australians. Whether you're a bitzer like me, whose father was from South America with Italian and French background, and mum's background's English, Irish, whether you're Asian, Pakistani, Indian, African, European, Aboriginal, I should say tribal or indigenous, Fijian, does not matter. This is, if you call this land your home and you stand and believe in democracy and truth and honesty and transparency and mateship and all the beautiful things our country's been built on, that's what it's about. And that's why from the moment I started talking to you, Graeme, I knew you were true blue, mate. I knew you were true blue, 100% Aussie. And I love everything you stand for, and what a top bloke you are. So I'm really glad to be a part of it.
Thanks, mate. You do your bit too. Don't worry about that. We appreciate anyone that does it. We're going to have to wind it up now, but thanks for coming along tonight, Dave. And we encourage people to watch these programs and have a look at the links that we put in the description, because those links will get you the information that's been discussed and other information that you need. We have a website. There's lots of things happening out there, but it's only going to work if you get involved. So thanks very much, Dave. We'll leave it there, and we'll catch up soon, mate.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
No, it's a pleasure was ours, mate. Thanks very much, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
Over now.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye for now.